Welcome to the Ask Fellow Skinny podcast with a guest. I'm proud to present Dave Rossi. Dave, welcome to the show. Please tell us more about yourself.
Peter, thank you so much. And you just asked me to do something that I do very well, which is talk about myself. um, well, first of all, I appreciate being on your show, and I appreciate the topic, having midlife crisis be a very near and dear topic to my heart. I was 46 and I was facing back surgery from an old college football injury, two slip discs. I was virtually paralyzed. I had to get an epidural, which is a choroidal steroid shot on my spine to walk. I was basically crawling around the house because I couldn't even stand. And I began to reflect on my life, and I began to reflect on how hard I'd worked and how much education I had and how many talents I had and how many gifts I had. And I realized, how did I try so hard and fail so miserably? I was 50 pounds overweight. I had a pending back surgery. I had this business with my wife who was just the wrong person, the wrong relationship, the wrong marriage. Um, and I wasn't talking to my parents. She had driven a wedge between my parents and my family and myself. And my best friend had died about 4 years prior to this kind of awakening. And I basically hit reset. I just said, I need to do something. And I went on a quest to figure out a new way to hit life. I hit reset. I left my marriage, four houses, two buildings, a business, three kids, two boats, and just said, I'm done. And just completely started from scratch. And it was quite a process. And here I am now, trying to teach and help people gather the information that I gathered and give it out.
Amazing journey. And you didn't talk about your books, and I would like to get into that as well because I'm a huge book lover, or I like to learn from books because it's so much easier to learn from other people's mistake. Not that I didn't do many or
Yeah.
still doing them, but I would like to talk about your first book about happiness, and I would like to dive deeper into your Alphas Die Early, the book that you wrote. I would like us to talk about midlife crisis and how men are experiencing midlife crisis and how is this different from women. So that should be the angle of our conversation.
Well, there's a lot there, and I think a lot of stuff that I really appreciate. My first book I wrote because I had no idea what happiness was. I was in this life with this big house, this business, 130 employees, and I just was so unhappy. I was so hollow, and I really didn't even know it, to be honest with you. In fact, I realized that when I wrote this first book called The Imperative Habit, it's seven non-spiritual practices towards spiritual behavior, and I can go into what I mean by that. But really, I didn't think there were any problems to my life because I didn't think any answers existed. At the time, it was, oh, I need another project to make work easier. Oh, maybe, my wife at the time and I need to converse better, learn better skills to talk to each other. Maybe, oh, it's just the time of life. Three kids are rough and it's just what it is. But, it really wasn't those things. And I thought because I had all those things in my life, all these dynamics and all these moving parts, that's the reason why my life was so unhappy. So I didn't really think about how unhappy I was. And when I hit reset and when I legitimately lost everything because I left the marriage and she wouldn't sell her half of the business, she wouldn't buy my half. So I shut it down. I lost our primary residence. Other three houses went into a trust for the children. And basically I had no money. I had to get a job. Um, and I wrote this book. It was funny. I had to live with my separated wife at the time because we just couldn't afford a place to live. It was a big house we could separate, but I wanted some privacy. So I'd take my laptop and I'd drive down the street and sit in a cul-de-sac and type my book in the car, The Imperative Habit. And it was really all these books that I researched, and I was mesmerized by all of these lessons and all these ways the brain worked from a antiquity perspective, an ancient philosopher perspective. And then I began to gather, newer books with modern psychology. And I was stunned that I didn't have this information when I was younger. And I would have made so many different choices had I known these things. And so I wrote Alpha's Die Early to help young men just to stop the train from going off the tracks when you're older, to kind of head off these midlife crises. And then I went through the crisis myself. And the first book was kind of how I got through it. And the second book was kind of how to prevent it.
Mhm.
Um, so I think that's kind of the beginning answer to your question. Um, Happiness is a very elusive thing. And I think the first thing I think people need to realize in any crisis is the difference between happiness as an emotion and happiness as a state of being. And
Hmm.
most people search happiness as an emotion and they look for, external things like a sporting event or exercise or a friend or lunch or, playing golf or, going out with shopping. These are external events that release chemicals in our brain. They release serotonin or oxytocin, dopamine even, and they make us feel happy. And then when that event ends, we're back into our place. And so happiness as a state of being is being happy without anything external. So when you remove the external events, you're just sitting there in the state of happiness. And that's a feeling or a state of being that takes time to create. And the way to create that, and I wrote a lot about this in my first book, is we have to remove the things that make us unhappy. And so most people think, oh, I'll just, rearrange my life. Well, it's an inside job. There really isn't a lot to rearrange besides the thoughts and the beliefs and your programming in your brain. And it starts by removing everything that would make you unhappy. Self-esteem, worry, doubt, fear, stress, adequacy, all of these things. We have to systematically rearrange our belief system to remove these emotions. And as you continue to remove them slowly over time, by rearranging a belief structure and introducing new ideas and new concepts, um, you legitimately just very happily, and life becomes very easy.
Okay, I have one comment. What I address as societal induced expectations uh, is so what you were talking about, what you had it all, a family business, property, children, everything what society expected of you, but you felt empty. And another thing, when so would you agree that happiness is not about having more, but you already hinted at that, but subtracting what prevents you from being happy?
Yeah, and I think there's lots of science now catching up with some of these ancient texts. I read a lot of books a lot of times, and I remember reading, and I was so low, and I wrote about this in my first book. I was so low. If somebody said wash your hair with tomato juice and you'd be happy, I would have done it. Like I was just, miserable and possibly, depressed. I would go behind my house in the mountains and I'd go for a walk and I'd literally just cry, like, you know. And then one of the things that I read was acceptance. So then I would cry and I'd say, I have to accept this. I got myself here. I have to accept that I'm here. And acceptance was a really big part of belief modifications. And you said something about being happy and being content. In a way, you're kind of alluding to one of these things about being content. That's a belief modification. And when you begin to become content, you begin to remove societal expectations, like you said. And that's just one belief modification that we can implement that takes time. And there's a scientific term called the illusory effect, which means if you tell yourself something enough times, eventually you will believe it. Your brain will believe it. And so you can tell yourself, yeah, I really have a lot of great things. I mean, I have my health and I have my family, and I want more, but more is not necessary. I'm alive, I'm healthy, I'm happy. And there's a great book called Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl, who was an Auschwitz survivor. And, I took some of what he said, which is the meaning of life is that life has meaning. And what that means is we should find enough happiness in just being alive. The opportunity to change our lives and to put our lives in a different place is enough to be happy about. And so I always say life is enough. If you're alive, that's enough. And prisoners of war, people with cancer, people who've lost loved ones will all say, and we've all learned this at a funeral. We've all gone to a funeral of a close loved one and said, "Oh, life is too short. I'm not going to sweat the big stuff or the small stuff. Like, I'm just so happy to be here. My friend has passed, and this is so sad. I'm going to live life to its fullest." And then a day later, we've completely reverted back to our old life. That's a lesson that you need to put into your life, and it takes practice. Practice, 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 practice. When I say my practice is you have to tell yourself life is enough. If you get in a car accident hey, life is enough. I'm still alive. Let's work through this. It's going to hurt and I got to pay some money or do whatever. Life is enough. Life is enough. Life is enough. And that's just one of maybe a dozen belief modifications that we can change over time to make ourselves feel happiness is a state of being.
I would like to have your because you're writing about alphas and also omega man. I would like to have your explanation how you explain omega man because
Okay.
the concept is quite new. Because we just talk all the time in media and everywhere alphas and betas and that's it. Can we talk
Yeah.
about omega man and would you touch the topic of how midlife crisis or how men go through midlife crisis with a bit different mindset so that our female listeners could understand what's going on in our head and
Yeah.
why we do experience so much suffer in this time, even if we are, let's say, extremely successful in the eyes of society. We have our status, we have our let's say property, we have cars, we have, you said you had two boats and stuff like that. So
Yeah, definitely. I lived that life. I lived that alpha life. And the alpha is really a play on biology. It's a play on our DNA and our Darwinian studies on survival of the fittest. Every animal wants to be the fittest because that's ingrained in our DNA to be the fittest. It's to propagate the species. That's a very powerful driver for lots of behavior. Now, we all have an ego, and the ego is a false projection of ourselves. It's a projection that we throw out to the world to be accepted and loved and to survive. Okay, but also it's to procreate. And I think the mistake that people make is that the world today, information moves so quickly that the veneer that we create to be an alpha for a man, to be an alpha, that veneer gets posted up. And I equate it to like a peacock, peacock's feathers. And the peacock with the brightest feathers gets the girl and gets to, mate. And so what's happening in society nowadays is a man looks at a Donald Trump and goes, "Oh wait, my feathers aren't like his, and he's really successful. So let me color it these feathers. Let me buy some feathers and put some feathers in here." And then oh no, it's not him. Oh, it's Keanu Reeves, who's more emotional and more brooding and mysterious. Okay, let me get rid of some feathers. Let me get the other feathers. And we're constantly recreating this image driven by biology. And then we present these feathers. And then what happens is, and I think in midlife crisis, you're old enough where the responsibility and the patterns and the scripts are pretty well worn. And the scripts don't work anymore. And so midlife crises are happening when we have this divergence of scripts, programs, and patterns run across a world that doesn't operate where those scripts do. And it's very hard for us as people to change our scripts and our patterns. And it's running head into a wall, which is the rate of information changing. And so I think men in general do not know what the biggest and brightest peacock looks like anymore. And the mistake with this is people end up picking the feathers and not the bird. And so as a person, as an authentic person that has feelings and emotions, we've lost that. We spend more time on the veneers and the feathers and not internally. And so I think for a woman, you got to get past the feathers. You have to just, push them aside. And I had this experience myself when I got divorced and started dating, and I can share some of those stories. But for a man, they're constantly trying to figure out as an animal, because it's in our instinct of what to act like. And the omega is the last. So alpha is the beginning and omega is the last. The omega man, the omega path is about no mask. It's pulling all the feathers out and saying, I'm not playing this game. There's no veneer. I'm raw, I'm authentic, I'm me, and that's what it is. And if you don't take it, life is enough, and that's okay. I'm going to find someone that does. I'm not going to have the expectation that I need to put a veneer up to get a project, to get work, to get a job, to mate, to find someone to spend time with. Because what I learned is it's better to be alone than in dysfunction. And I didn't want anyone to pick me for work or for dating based on my feathers. I wanted someone to know me. And so when I would, in fact, my wife tells a story. She says, "Do you remember when we first started dating? You said, don't expect me to be the kind of guy that likes to curl up on the couch and cuddle because I'm not a cuddler." And I said, well, I probably meant it at the time. I wanted to be very authentic and tell you exactly, who I am and not have you get confused and have some future expectation that may not be there. I wanted to present myself in the most accurate light. And I wanted her to present herself or anyone I dated in the most accurate light. And so the Omega is really about steps and techniques and plays and basics and challenges to keep removing these veneers, removing our biology, our DNA, removing our egos, removing our masks to get on a path that's truly, truly authentic. And two things come with that. It's sustainable and it's fulfilling.
Ooh, I have a nerd question. I hope it's not too nerdy, as you can see.
No, no, I'm
I,
I'm I'm very much that. Trust me.
like you're talking about how getting rid of all this mask and get back to be authentic self. It resembles individualization, according to Carl Jung, to me,
Yeah.
and
Individuation.
I
Yeah.
do believe that is the similar concept. And another thing, and that is maybe a bit of challenge for you. It's not meant in a nasty way, but do you think that authenticity, like in a midlife, authenticity is if you dare being authentic self, then you gain more value uh,
Oh,
because
yeah.
because then you become alpha through let's say through
Yeah.
allowing ourselves to be authentic and not
Yeah.
alpha per se. We become alpha in our field, and people will start trusting us more, of course, more mature people that are
Yeah.
already in midlife and that have already dealt with um, all the societal expectations, and that they're searching their way back to themselves.
Yeah.
That they are attracted by authentic people, and the more we are authentic, more we are attracted to authentic people.
You're 100% correct. And I kind of look at it like the Wizard of Oz.
Mhm.
The perception of power, and this is kind of Machiavellian too. The perception of power uh, is rewarded. And Wizard of Oz had this giant, face and the flames and the smoke, and it looked like this powerful man. And then you pull the curtain back, and actually the guy was a nice little guy, the wizard, and you're like, oh, what a nice little man. And he became a very, very kind, likable figure in that movie. And so what you're saying is really a lot of science. It's not mainstream science, but Dr. David Hawkins mapped a scale of consciousness, and he talked about that energy field. That energy field is, and I don't want to say attraction in a sexual way, but it is very attractive. It's magnetic in a way, and that confidence. It takes the most amount of strength to be yourself. It does not take strength to hide. And people who hide behind theatrics or feathers or masks really lack the strength to be authentic. And when you have that courage to step into a defenseless, what you perceive as a defenseless position, hey, if I share this, I may not look like the alpha. I may not look like the 800-pound gorilla. I may not look like the peacock with the biggest feathers. It takes courage to say, I'm going to walk out into that circle with all of these peacocks fluffing up their feathers, and I'm going to walk out with none. I'm just going to walk out and just be a bird. And from a biological perspective, that would not get you a mate. But we are not peacocks. We're Homo sapiens. We're the most powerful animal on this planet. We have surged every other animal with the advent of cognition inside of our psyche. And that's a very powerful thing. And we have to stop letting our cognition get hijacked by our biology. The drive to stay alive, to throw feathers up, is over. That model does not work and it's not sustainable. And so, for me, when I would be very, very vulnerable and very honest with people, the results were the opposite of what we've all been told as men.
Mhm.
And your body begins to change. And now I look at integrity and the purest form of honesty and accuracy as a higher level of survivability for me. So my animal side now it says, okay, we find success in being honest and having integrity, and that is the way we're always going to go. And that portrays in work, and I'm much more successful that way, and as well as my love life exceeded because of that.
Would you agree that um, the more we mature, the more we pick wisdom over power.
Well, I'm not sure. I think it might look that way. Um, I think we kind of begin to, again, our patterns become more worn, and I think we find that we'll have more power remaining in our lane or remaining in our scripts and our patterns. Because, they always say the devil you know is safer than the devil you don't know. And people would rather believe something wrong and safe than venture out into something uncomfortable. And I call all of this spirituality, by the way, and I think that might freak some people out. And I want to explain why it shouldn't. Spirituality to me is a response over feedback or body. So when I'm running or exercising and my legs are tired and my body's producing lactic acid and it sends signals to my brain, or my heart is beating hard and my body says you should stop. You're tired. Stop running. That's a biological thing. My biology is saying save your life. Stop. This is too hard. And it's been proven that your body does that at about 40% capacity of your limits. So my brain instantly, so we've all had that experience. And then we've all had this experience. No, 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 keep running. If you stop now, you're really not going to make any improvements. And so imagine if we stopped exercising every time our body told us to stop. Now, what happens is we should be able to transcend that mechanism. And that's a spiritual act to me, acting over the body. Hey, stop. No, I'm not going to stop. You really should stop. I'm not going to stop. You're really tired. I can go farther. But you're really, really tired. I know, but I can go farther. Trust me. That conversation is you think it's you, but it's not. It's your higher self arguing with your body. And the body's responses are automatic. It's not like you consciously say, hey, how much lactic acid do I have? Can we check it out? Let's see what the quantity is to see if it's measurable. It doesn't happen. It's automatic. Your brain is just shooting out ideas to save your life. And this is the same thing with stress, self-esteem, love, doubt, worry, jealousy. All of these things are feedback that our brain is giving us. And it's spiritual to act over it. So to be courageous, to have authenticity, to break scripts and let go of power and focus on wisdom are all spiritual acts. It's acts that go beyond the safety of what our brain is telling us. And it's just everybody should know that a midlife crisis is really about your body telling you something is not right. There's a narrative that is no longer like imagine if you had the words to a play for Shakespeare and you go to a comedy and you said, here, read these lines for this play. Well, I'm wearing a clown hat and a clown nose, and I'm going to be Shakespeare. No, the something's not right. And that's the clash between our scripts and our society and our narratives.
Amazing. So we already touched that, but where do you see the difference between how male and female perceive midlife crisis? Where is the key difference for yourself?
Well, men, the biology for men is a big component that most people, yet alone men, can fend off. Their biology kicks in, and they want to put feathers in, and they want to portray veneers, and they want bravado, and they're very strategic on solving problems, very, very strategic, and they're going to keep looking for something that works. And I did this. I was looking for a persona that worked. Maybe I should be a little more direct. Maybe I should be more emotional. Maybe I should have more bravado. Maybe I should be easygoing. Maybe I should wear these clothes. Maybe I should dress more this way. And I began to manufacture more feathers. And so a man is really in fixing mode. And what happens is they're very stubborn. The first sign of trouble is stubbornness because it's really closed-mindedness. And closed-mindedness is a sign of somebody who's not able to have courage and be vulnerable. It's very vulnerable to have an open mind. It's very vulnerable to be open to new ideas. The brain likes predictive behaviors. And so when somebody's closed-minded, they're saying, I don't want to experience new ideas because those might be unsafe. So instantly you can get their level of courageousness and bravery and ability to be vulnerable and share deeper emotions by how closed-minded they are. If they're not open to ideas is an instant sign. And so men are very rush in, fix it, kick things out the door, very reactive. They respond to emotions very, very quickly. And women tend to garnish support. They tend to share emotions when they're hurt. They team together. They're more nurturing. They're more growing. They repair in a different way. They stabilize. And I think the mistake that a lot of women make is they count on men. Like they think a man will help them. Now, biologically, that's true. I see a lot of, social media posts that say, hey, a woman just wants to be provided for and she wants emotional stability. Yes, we all do. But I think you need to be sovereign first. You
Mhm.
can't be dependent until you're independent first. You have to be emotionally independent and sovereign and have some level of self-mastery. Because if somebody mistreats you, if you're not whole, you might take that mistreatment. And that's where I think a lot of people go wrong is they don't set effective boundaries, not because they don't want to, but because they're unable to maintain these boundaries. Now, for men, they're not trained to share emotions. And so I think women have these expectations that if they share, men will share. They're not trained. They've been trained the opposite their whole lives. And I think that's kind of how women, get into these circular loops with emotionally shallow relationships. And that's hard. And I can acknowledge how hard that is.
Okay, Dave, before we conclude, what is the number one advice you would give to our listeners for handling the midlife crisis? You gave us so much wisdom already, but what is the number one? Where should they start when they start
Well,
experiencing the symptoms? What is the number one thing they should go and start checking?
well, I think that may be different for every person has different ways of reaching the same journey. You know, I I can tell you a path that I think has lots of steps. And meditation is very important because it teaches you to ignore thoughts. It's nothing woo-woo. It's nothing, you're not supposed to relax. You're not supposed to, float off to sleep. It's literally a practice like hitting a tennis ball against the wall 100 times. It's a practice of letting go of
Mhm.
thoughts. And that practice allows you to implement new belief structures and new ideas and open-mindedness. Um, so the one advice, and I think the reason why I say that is getting information, like reading and getting information is really, really important. And there's so much out there that can help somebody at every level. The one bit of advice, God, that's a tough one, Peter. There's, um, I guess the most important thing is I'm going to use a quote again from Viktor Frankl. He said, between stimulus and response, there's a small moment in time. And in that small moment in time is where all of our growth is found. And the one bit of advice I would give to people is to grab that small moment in time before response, not to react, but to grab it and then ask yourself, what do I want to achieve by my next response? And what I'm about to say or do, will it get me to that goal?
Amazing. Before we finish, Dave, please tell our listeners where they can reach you, where they can get your books, and
Oh, for
what's
sure.
what's the best.
Both books are on Amazon. The Imperative Habit, published in 2019 on Amazon, and Alphas Die Early, published January 2026 on Amazon. My website also, daverossiglobal.com. I do offer a meditation course. Um, but I do a lot for free. So if anyone has a question, just DM me on TikTok at Dave Rossi Global or Instagram, Dave Rossi Global. I'm really here to help people. I have a very successful construction business, and I do this on the side to help. And I'm really here to help people get resources to make their lives more fulfilling.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you for being my guest tonight.
Thanks so much, Peter. Have a great day.